Okay, hi everybody. It's week 6, our final week of the class here. And this week we're dealing with the 1980s and beyond. And we only add the beyond because we're out of time, so we can't go any further. But well, remember last week, in week 5, the theme was Saturday nights, and we're looking at the 1970s, and I mentioned that there's a lot of new issues. Well, this week, as we look at the 1980s, I want to offer the thought that pop culture has shifted. Pop culture doesn't go away. Pop culture has been there a long time, as we talked about. It continues to be here with us today. But in the 1980s, and as we kind of move into the 90s and into the new millennium, I want to make the argument that pop culture has kind of shifted. Because if you remember, pop culture in the 50s and the 60s kind of eschewed materialism. Bad, right? People just, the suburbia and wanting to get all the stuff in the house, in the car, and the washing machines, all that. And the pop culture kind of, pushed away from that. So why do we have to do that and challenge that whole thing? But I'm going to argue in the 80s and beyond, materialism is embraced by pop culture. Pop culture kind of does a 180, and now, to quote, to kind of pull a line out of the Madonna songs, greed is good. Right? That's kind of the way we're looking at that. And some of that may be because, again, we have these new technologies. Social media now becomes very important to pop culture. Pop culture, I would also argue, starts to drift into some foreign policy issues, as opposed to just thinking about how we can make some changes here at home. Pop culture now looks at American attitudes and American involvement abroad. And pop culture starts getting involved in maybe some foreign policy issues as well. So I just want you to think about that, right? Pop culture is still around. Pop culture is very popular, but they shift their focus here in the 80s. And it goes from kind of pushing away the dominant culture that you have to have all this stuff to kind of embracing that old dominant culture idea. So it's an interesting dynamic on how that changes out. I also want to offer up the notion that in the 80s we begin to redefine again the family and what constitutes a family, and that thinking kind of resurfaces. What is a family? The traditional family, once again, is being challenged, and we offer up a lot of different varieties, if you will, because of divorce rate, because of same-sex marriage. As you mentioned from last week, the gay rights issue is brought up. Well, it continues on, so here a decade later, and now it tends to find its way into these other social issues that are there. So the 80s and the pop culture is really struggling with a lot of things and almost trying to redefine itself to that degree. All right, so in our discussion this week, what we're going to ask you to do again is that we want you to do another PowerPoint we did a few weeks ago, or a Word doc. Either one is fine, but the PowerPoints you guys are doing are very good. All right, where we want you to identify a significant person, a significant item, a significant event, and basically show how they've kind of inspired or what role they played in culture, how they helped kind of develop American culture. Why was it an important part of American culture? Okay, so that's up to you to decide. There's a plethora of things you can work with, but that's what we want you to do. We want you to select something, a person, an event, a thing, and say, this is, was important. This had a role in kind of shaping culture in America, and here's why. All right? And then finally, what we're going to do is our last look at television in the writing assignment for this week. Okay? And we're going to look at that. And there's a big list of things. Again, I'll talk about these in the live lecture. I just want to introduce them. There's a list of television from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that you can look at. And what we want you to do is kind of, when you write your paper, we want you to evaluate, was TV really attempting to show the reality of what was happening in America? Or was it attempting to influence, or maybe did it influence how Americans thought? So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? Was TV out there showing us what happened and what really was America? Or did it influence us into thinking how we wanted America to be? Or maybe in another way, was TV used, or do people who control those markets try to influence our thinking and shape culture in America? So there's a number of ways you can go with that. Okay, but for this week, as I say, the 80s is an interesting time because we're shifting gears. Pop culture is shifting, embracing different things, which kind of makes the dominant culture kind of, shake its head because going, wait a minute, I thought you hated this stuff. It starts to expand out, and then we have these new ideas, right, of what's going on. So we're kind of wrapping everything up. So we want us to decide, what did we see as a person or event or a thing that we think is most significant in our cultural studies? And then finally, a final analysis of TV. And it's because, as I've told you a few weeks ago, such a powerful medium. What do you think? Was it about reality and showing reality, or was it about shaping and trying to create reality, if you think of it that way? All right? Okay, so I look forward to your discussions and reading your papers this week. If there's anything I can do as we kind of wrap up the course, don't hesitate to contact me. Okay, remember it's a short week this week. The final discussion is due by Friday, and there's no quiz this week in week 6 either. All right, have a good week now. Bye.